Atilla Yesilada. As usual, we're going to talk about Turkey. What is the hottest topic in Turkey as of Sunday, 10th of August? The fake diploma scandal. Apparently, there are several national and regional crime syndicates which sell diplomas or, in fact, any other certificates that would be required to work in a profession for very reasonable fees. A driver's license might go for $2,000, even though you have never driven a car or any other, motor vehicle. We don't know how widespread that scandal is. The official numbers are only a couple of thousand of such diplomas, or I'm sorry, let me just lower this a little bit, or certificates have been issued, but I widely doubt it because crime is a large scale business. It can easily be scaled up. Nobody becomes a drug dealer to sell to three people. The objective is to sell to 3 million people. And since it's so easy to hack into Turkey's e-state systems, including the judicial websites, as well as, any university, I suspect we will see thousands, maybe 10,000s of cases like that. This is sort of the final blow, the death blow to free market economy. And allow me to turn off this air conditioner because it's making strange noises and that's probably not good for the sound quality. Okay, sorry for this short break. A veiled assumption of a free market economy is that people's wages, salaries, compensation depends on the demand for the goods and services they produce. The more you work, the better skills you acquire or experience, a higher price or wage you command. And the start to that is, of course, a university diploma or, a certificate from a bar association validating that you can work as a lawyer or eventually a prosecutor. Once you introduce fake certificates and diplomas, the merit-based free market economy collapses. And it's really, really difficult to come back from that blow. But today I'm going to address another problem, which is more accessible and I think is important, which is Turkey's stagflation. Turkey will be in stagflation for the foreseeable future, at least as long as the current government is in power. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying the main opposition party, which is a candidate to topple Mr. Erdogan in the next elections, will do a much better job. Their idea of a welfare economy or a just economy is to dole out money. They really don't have a plan to generate revenue or to make the economy more efficient. This video starts with a basic definition of where the Turkish economy now stands. A few words on stagflation, what it actually means in terms of Turkey or most emerging markets. And three, why I don't think Turkey will ever get over this nasty disease of stagflation. Turkish economy has recorded strong growth in the first quarter. According to nowcasts by Betam think tank, the first half growth will be 5.2% per annum, which is very strong. And Q on Q growth will be 1.1%, another commendable number. Current account deficits are very low. The current account data, balance of payments data, lags real time by 2 months. But the consensus is that this year the current account deficit will not exceed 1.5% of GDP. And the rule of thumb is that Turkey, a country like Turkey, can easily finance a current account deficit of 4% to the GDP, in particular when money is migrating away from the America, reducing the value of American dollars. There has been some success against inflation, even though most people on the street don't feel it. And leftist intellectuals like me claim that the numbers issued by the official stats agency Turkstat are fabricated and underestimated, which I agree with. But no matter how you look at it, Turkish headline inflation dropped from 70% sometime last year to 33%. I look at a wide variety of inflation indicators, such as anticipation surveys, household surveys. They all show inflation dropping, not as drastically as the official agency would lead us to believe, but there is a substantial decline. Currently, the official CPI rate is 33%. Add 10% on top of that, let's say 43%. This is still an achievement. It's not an achievement that you can write home about. When I go to the market, I come out poorer and buying less every time I go. But put it this way, from excruciating pain, I am back to chronic migraines. We're doing disastrously in terms of unemployment. The headline figure declined to 8.5% or so, which is not bad for a country like Turkey. But the broad based unemployment, which includes those discouraged from seeking jobs, those who don't like their jobs or who would like to work more hours, are 33%. One third of Turkish labor force is involuntarily unemployed or involuntarily semi-employed. At a young country where the working age the workers to I'm sorry, in a young country where only 50% of the population are working, this is a disaster. I mean, we're just, leaving money on the table by not employing these young people. And July data, high frequency indicators like PMI data, which are also widely used in the West, in the United States, most people prefer ISM, but they are more or less identical as far as methodology goes, show that both manufacturing and services are declining, they're shrinking. And the latest private survey on consumer confidence has recorded a 9-point decline, which is major, it's statistically important. The production weakness has been a facet of Turkish economy for the last year or so, but the consumers usually felt more upbeat. But now it appears that since there has been no mid-year wage or pension hikes, their spending power has been sufficiently eroded by inflation that they've lost their appetite to consume. So this is essentially a stagflation. I mean, an economy not growing at its optimal rate, not at full employment, but still generating 35% inflation. What are the causes of Turkey's inflation? Well, monetary policy used to be one because Mr. Erdogan believed lower interest rates would beget lower inflation. When he appointed Mehmet Şimşek in June of 2023, he changed his views and now he believes in orthodox monetary policy. And monetary policy has been tightened sufficiently. I would argue if we're going to solve the inflation problem solely through monetary policy, it should be much tighter. But let's face it, there is no desire among the constituency to suffer that fate. The first problem that contributes to inflation is the budget deficit. The program is to reduce it to 3.1% of GDP from roughly 5% last year. But recently, Mehmet Şimşek admitted it would be around 4% or so. Obviously, the economists among you would make a distinction between non-interest deficit and the total deficit. The non-interest deficit being the worst kind, because the other one goes to, interest rates and salaries, etc. This is kind of different in Turkey because uh, when you pay high interest rates, usually in the United States or in UK, people invested into retirement funds and the money stays there. It doesn't come back to circulation to stimulate the economy. According to a blog by the Central Bank of Turkey, this is not the case. If you pay people high interest rates on their deposits or on their government bonds, uh, they buy a house or car next year. So in Turkey, the size of the total deficit is much more important than the non-interest deficit. Non-interest deficit is admittedly low, $2.5 billion or so, but total deficit will be roughly 4% of GDP. And as I've said, in my view, it constantly injects income into the economy, boosting up consumer demand. Of course, the biggest problem that nobody can solve is that no one believes Ankara is serious about fighting inflation. People know instinctively that not even Turkish economists believe in the very traditional, tested, and proven trade off between growth and employment on one hand and disinflation at the other hand. There are always some smart young dudes or girls who are looking for a way out. That is, we can grow 5% a year with very low inflation. Yes, that's possible. You invest into innovation, you train your young people better, you get rid of the regulatory obstacles to cheaper production, you streamline your laws, you make your judiciary more efficient. Is that realistic? Nah, there is no such agenda. If you ask Mr. Erdogan, this is the best functioning democracy in the world. Besides, doing any of these things would impair his ability to dole out state funds to his cronies, which in return finances election campaigns. So, in the absence of structural reforms, tight money and tight fiscal policy is the only way to deal with inflation, to the point where the actors in the economy, the agents in the economy recognize, these guys are serious. We can't jack up our salaries or prices simply because they will, smash our heads with higher interest rates and higher taxes. And this is not going to happen. As I've said, it's mostly an Erdogan problem because even though he accepted that it requires tight monetary policy to fight inflation, he still maintains the view that this new equilibrium can be achieved without hurting growth much. And his advisors are not telling him it doesn't work that way, sir. Okay? But that's probably an oversimplification. The people doesn't want to accept that trade-off. It is very painful to fight inflation, which has reached 30%. It will take massive sacrifices in employment and real wages, but that will only last a year. Once the memory, the inertia of inflation disappears from the recent data, the economy can grow faster, produce higher real wages at very low inflation rates. So we're in purgatory. I mean, people want low inflation, but they want to achieve it without making any sacrifices. And of course, there is a traditional fight between classes of who should bear the burden, the rich people, the poor people, etc. Of course, the rich people should bear the burden. But that too is not happening because nowadays, I'm really sorry, Turkey's rich people are mostly supporters of Mr. Erdogan. And, harming their interests is political suicide. So what will happen? Well, ceteris paribus, which means barring external developments which cannot be foreseen at this point, Turkish CPI will decline to 30% at the end of the year versus the central bank target, the midpoint target of 24%, and growth will be about 3%. In 2026, the central bank's inflation target is 12%. It won't get there. Turkish inflation will not fall below 25% in 2026, and it will slowly start eating up into growth. In 2027, which probably will be an election year, it will get worse as Erdogan opens the fiscal floodgates to buy votes. So we'll get a huge boost in inflation, probably from 25 to 40 or so. And then afterwards, if he wins the election or if he loses, the new government will have to increase interest rates and taxes to lower inflation. So Turkey would be in this doom loop of stagflation forever. And growth will drop every year simply because when you have, this is why I started with the fake diploma scandal. I mean, there is no protection of law. There is no trust in justice. No one believes if you have a conflict with the state or with a business counterparty, you will get justice in the court of law. Then why would you invest into your factory? Why would you invest into better education for your children? Why would you invest into self-improvement? But these are the main motivators or locomotives of growth. Of course, you have to have capital accumulation, which in Turkey goes to real estate or gold and dollars under the matrix. So there's a problem. But the bigger problem is you have to have human quality to work with artificial intelligence or newfangled technologies or machines that you have just created. But when people get their diplomas online for $4,000, $5,000, who will do those things? This is not unusual. Turkey had another decade like that, where it had low growth, roughly 3% per annum, with on average 70% inflation. This was 1990s. The reasons were different, but there was no crisis. The system lasted simply because the government didn't mind if the rates on its borrowing or the central bank policy rate compensated for inflation. If Turkey continues with the current monetary policy, which correctly responds to inflation shocks by raising interest rates, you can go on like that forever. But if Mr. Erdogan, for political reasons probably, decides to go back to unorthodox monetary policy and order the central bank to cut rates, well, Turkey will have a currency crisis. This is the story of 2027. The current story, as I mentioned, is that countries go into these stagflationary episodes. I mean, like United States might, because of sudden policy changes like tariff wars or trade wars or restrictions on illegal migrants or earthquakes, war, Ukraine, floods. I am not aware of any other country that has been condemned to stagflation simply because neither the political class, nor intellectuals, nor public believe in standard economic theory. So this is my story. Thanks for your patience. Please keep those comments coming. Subscribe, share, ring the bell, whatever feels good for you. And most importantly, stay chill. Take care now. This has been a presentation of Real Turkey channel by Atilla Yesilada.